Thanks, Beatrice, and thank you to NOAA and the U.S. Forest Service for having us here today. My name is Simon Nee. I'm the Grants Commissioner for the City of Toledo, and I'm here to talk a little bit about how we used all of the great data that Beatrice just discussed, and how some of these IRA funding opportunities are allowing us to use that data to address canopy equity and mitigate urban heat in some of our disadvantaged communities where we know it's most needed, right? And I think that's to me that's the biggest practical takeaway of all of the research that Beatrice just discussed, is that it gave us a really clear path forward for where tree planting was most needed to mitigate urban heat, and also because we took that initial step of aligning with ARPA qualified census tracts to do some initial tree planting, it gave us a pretty good picture of how urban heat and tree canopy, or lack thereof, align with other disadvantage indicators. So when this grant opportunity came along through the Inflation Reduction Act, through the Urban and Community Forestry Program, with its focus on equitable access to trees and nature, emphasis on disadvantaged communities, the alignment was pretty clear and natural for us. I think one thing that was really helpful about the data that Beatrice discussed is that it gave us the ability to really clearly align with the grant criteria around serving disadvantaged communities, the way that the White House Council on Environmental Quality defined them, and to tell the story of the magnitude of the disparity in tree canopy equity that we have here in Toledo. So on the left is another map of the density of tree canopy by census tract that we have here in Toledo. On the right is a screenshot from the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool that was used to identify disadvantaged communities for this grant opportunity. Unsurprisingly, there's a pretty clear relationship between disadvantage and lack of tree canopy. I think Toledo is probably far from unique in that regard, but having this data allowed us to understand and explain the magnitude of that disparity, and to understand how to best address it, right? I think one thing that was really striking coming out of this data was how much sparser the cover actually is in our 10 lowest canopy census tracts, all of which are CJST disadvantaged communities. The average canopy cover in those 10 tracts is about 5.9%. In the 10 census tracts with the highest, it's over 53%. So it's quite stark. In addition to the problem, that disparity, having this data allowed us to give us a really strong foundation for a plan for addressing it in a way that was going to be most impactful and well aligned with the priorities of this program. I think the ARPA analysis, while it used a slightly different metrics for defining disadvantage than CJST did, just because that tool didn't exist yet at that time, the overlap is again pretty clear and striking. So in late summer of last year, we were fortunate to be selected for an Inflation Reduction Act Urban and Community Forestry Award from the U.S. Forest Service. This is going to allow us to plant almost 11,000 trees over the course of the next 4 years and change now. In addition to that, we incorporated a workforce development program focused in the disadvantaged census tracts, where we'll actually have a paid urban forestry training program for public high school students from qualified census tracts, where over the summer they'll learn basic urban forestry skills, get some hands-on training, and when they graduate high school and complete the program, they will be eligible for priority consideration for jobs with the City of Toledo's forestry operation. So, I think this is a great example of how these funding opportunities can both incentivize and create an opportunity to think about addressing and building urban tree canopy as more than just planting trees, right? In addition, we need to plant the trees, but we also need the workforce there to steward and care for them once they're planted, right? And that's a challenge that the city has faced, is having adequate workforce to do that. And so this grant really provided an opportunity for us to meet that workforce need, and for also to provide to establish a pipeline into good paying urban forestry jobs for disadvantaged communities. We've also got a pretty robust K-12 and community and engagement and education program. And of course, all of the benefits of this project will go to disadvantaged communities. I think the most exciting thing about our project to me is the fact that we really tried to take a comprehensive approach to thinking about how to address this canopy equity issue, right? A significant number of our trees are going to be street trees in those priority census tracts, but looking at the mapping that we had, knowing where those heat islands were concentrated, and knowing what our right-of-way looked like, we know that street tree planting alone isn't going to fully address the problem. So we to think about, are there areas where maybe the tree lawn isn't big enough, where it doesn't make sense to plant in the right of way, or we can't because of utility issues? Are there other creative ways that we can address this canopy equity issue in those areas? And that's where programs like our residential tree planting program, in which we'll have free residents will be able to request free tree planting on their properties in exchange for agreeing to do some basic maintenance of it for a few years afterwards. And that it's an example of the creative solutions, I think, that that these kinds of programs encourage thinking about. We also worked with our local land bank to put together a pretty ambitious tree planting program on vacant lots. Toledo is a city with a lot of vacancies, a lot of vacant lots. Many of those are in some of our disadvantaged communities where we know we need trees. So we said, hey, as part of this project, can we take a really granular look at what the mapping looks like, where those vacancies are, try to kind of overlay the two and figure out where planting in those areas will be most impactful. I think the partnerships that we have on this project were really critical to that. As I mentioned, we're working closely with our land bank, one of the two major owners of those public vacant lots, to make sure that we're selecting those specific planting sites in a way that's going to maximize the benefit of the planting, as well as create the conditions for future redevelopment projects. Working with our metro parks to do some focused planting in some of their parks in these disadvantaged communities to support their efforts to create these sort of green heat refuges. And the Woodlawn Cemetery and Arboretum Foundation is our key partner on that workforce development piece, working with Toledo Public Schools. And then our local chapter of Keep America Beautiful, Keep Toledo Lucas County Beautiful, is bringing their expertise to the K-12 and community engagement pieces of this. So I think it's an example of how thinking comprehensively about addressing this issue, both getting more trees in the ground in the present moment and creating the conditions for that canopy to thrive in the future, how a grant opportunity like this really, it created an opportunity for us to be just a little bit more ambitious, I think, and think a little bit creatively, and hopefully do a project that's going to have some real impact. So thank you all for your time, and I will hand it back over to Casey.